This is Richard Sax at the University of Rio Grande. I hope you'll watch my show this month. Later today, we'll be talking about football bowl picks with my son, Jonathan Sax from San Francisco. Please tune in. Good afternoon and welcome. This is Dr. Richard Sax. I'm Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at the University of Rio Grande and Rio Grande Community College in beautiful southeastern Ohio. And you know it's December for two reasons. Number one, I'm wearing an ugly Christmas tie. This is my Grinch That Stole Christmas tie. And also we're doing a football pick show. Since Professor Ray Mature couldn't be here, I'm glad to welcome my son, Jonathan Sax, who was a triathlete at the University of Michigan, currently works for Liaison Artists in San Francisco, and he is zooming in from San Francisco with Bowl Picks. Welcome, John.
Greetings, everybody. It's an honor to be here. I watch College Game Day every Saturday throughout the fall, and it just almost feels like I'm a celebrity guest picker. So it's the next best thing. I'm really looking forward.
Okay, great. And thanks to Mike Thompson and Patrick Dengel here, who will put some of the, who will put actually all of the games on. The very first game is the Air Force Reserve Celebration Bowl. This is two HBCU teams playing in Atlanta. HBCU stands for Historically Black Colleges and Universities. North Carolina A&T is playing against Alcorn State, and my pick is Alcorn State. Jonathan?
I like North Carolina A&T. They won this bowl game last year. I also believe that these are the only two football championship subdivision teams in the 39 bowls, right?
Excellent point. Excellent point. Then we move on to the New Mexico Bowl in my previous city of Albuquerque with North Texas State versus Utah State. With a mad shout out to the Associate VP of Athletics, Kent Stanley, who I worked with at Fort Lewis College. I'm picking Utah State. How about you, John?
Also picking Utah State. They went 10-2 this year. Both their losses were against ranked teams in Michigan State at the start of the year, and then their season finale against Boise State.
Okay, great. Next bowl game is Auto Nation Cure Bowl in Orlando, Florida. Tulane versus Louisiana. And I believe this is Louisiana Lafayette, not LSU. And I'm going to pull for Tulane.
I also am. Shout out to Tulane alum and good friend of mine here in San Francisco, Annie Walker. I'm pulling for the Green Wave.
All right, the Green Wave. The next bowl we're going to pick is the Mitsubishi Motors Las Vegas Bowl, and that is Fresno State versus Arizona State. I love the Central Valley of California, and for that reason only, I'm pulling for Fresno State.
I like Arizona State. Herm Edwards is one of my favorite football coaches of all time. You have to point out that 2002 speech he had when his New York Jets lost to our Cleveland Browns. You play to win the game. After that speech, the Jets went on to win the AFC East and go 7-2 after that. So I got to pull for the Sun Devils in this one.
That's a great call, and I love Herm Edwards too. And I think we actually watched that game together. But yeah, that's hilarious. The Raycom Media Camellia Bowl, and I think a camellia is a flower, and that's in Montgomery, Alabama. Georgia Southern versus Eastern Michigan. I've spent so much time on the Eastern Michigan campus in Ypsilanti. Many people don't know Domino's Pizza was started by Tom Monahan in like 1962, right on the corner of whatever that main street is next to the huge building that looks like a body part. I won't go any further than that. So I'm pulling for Eastern Michigan, EMU Eagles.
Absolutely, I am as well. Got to pull for Ypsilanti and our Washtenaw County next door neighbors.
There you go. The R&L Carriers New Orleans Bowl has Middle Tennessee State versus Appalachian State. And my president at Fort Lewis College is now at Middle Tennessee State, and he was not a great president. So for that reason alone, I'm pulling for Appalachian State.
Yeah, I am as well. I think that they're going to pull it out in this one. I saw Middle Tennessee State play in the Motor City Bowl, and despite that being a completely different team a good decade ago, Appalachian State, speaking of a decade ago, we all know what happened in the Big House in 2007. So,
I was there with Gareth. It was nightmarish, yes. I think those were Rich Rod years, weren't they?
that was actually the final season of Lloyd Carr, but
Okay.
But redemption was sought in that bowl game that year when we beat defending national champions Florida.
There you
So,
go. All right.
there's that.
All right. Well, good. I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce this, but the Chirabundi Boca Raton Bowl. And I have to believe that's in Boca Raton, Florida, with UAB versus Northern Illinois. Just to show some MAC connection, I'm going to pull for Northern Illinois.
Yeah, I definitely am feeling the MAC pride in this one, but I do have Alabama Birmingham winning this one, seeing that Alabama is significantly closer to Boca Raton than Northern Illinois, and it's going to be basically a home game for them.
Okay, the DXL Frisco Bowl should probably be in San Francisco, but it happens to be in Frisco, Texas. San Diego State versus Ohio U. One of my best friends and essentially an uncle to Jonathan is Cliff Hirschman, who graduated from San Diego State. But we're way too close to Ohio U here, so I'm going to pull for Ohio U.
Yeah, I am as well. I believe Ray Matura is also an Ohio U alum who I'm standing in for today, so I'll pick Ohio U in this one.
There you go. The Bad Boy Mowers Gasparilla Bowl, and I want to meet some of the Cowboys who named that one. The Bad Boy Mowers Gasparilla Bowl is in Tampa, Florida. It's Marshall versus South Florida. You may know Huntington, West Virginia. Marshall is just about 40 miles southeast of where I'm sitting right now. And my only response is we are Marshall.
Yeah, I like Marshall as well. You got to realize that South Florida went 7-0 to start the season. They finished the season 0-5. So they went 7-5, and I think Marshall's got the momentum.
Great. The Makers Wanted Bahamas Bowl is in Nassau, Bahamas. How cool is that? And this is Florida International, FIU versus Toledo. With a shout out to Amy Giordano and the other people at Owens Community College in Toledo. I'm pulling for University of Toledo. My father's alma mater, undergraduate alma mater, Jonathan's grandfather's alma mater.
Yeah, I like Toledo as well. A lot of Sax history in Toledo, not only generations ago, but I think Dad and I probably have driven through Toledo on 75 and 80 East hundreds of times.
Yeah.
So got to pull for Tony Paco's in Toledo.
A mad shout out to Tony Paco's, one of the best restaurants in America. Great. Famous Idaho Potato Bowl is in Boise, Idaho. That's Western Michigan versus BYU. Once again, the MAC connection. I got to pull for Western Michigan with a shout out to Scott Friesner, one of my best grad school friends who's taught in the English department at Western Michigan for about 3 decades.
Yep, I've got Western Michigan and MAC in this one as well.
Good. The Jared Birmingham Bowl in Birmingham, Alabama. I have to believe that's Jared Jewelers, Memphis versus Wake Forest. With a mad shout out to my across the street neighbor in Shaker Heights, Dr. Grimberg. I'm going to pull for Wake Forest, which is his doctoral alma mater.
That makes sense. I like Memphis in this one. Memphis had an incredible game in the American Athletic Conference Championship against Central Florida. Central Florida came back from a 17-point deficit and beat them. But I still think Memphis is looking for redemption in this one.
Okay, should be a good game. The Lockheed Martin Armed Forces Fort Worth Bowl in Fort Worth, Texas is Houston versus Army. And those of you who saw the Army-Navy game last weekend, you would not pick against Army. So I am going for Army, and that noise in the background was Mike Thompson, who is a Army vet. That was not feedback. That was Mike Thompson. So I think he's also pulling for Army. How about you, John?
Yeah, for all the same reasons, you got to pick Army in this one. Despite Houston, this one being in Texas, the Armed Forces Bowl, you've got to think that this is going to have a lot of Army folks in the stands as well.
Okay, the Dollar General Bowl in Mobile, Alabama, is Buffalo versus Troy. Now, I always thought Troy and Sparta were in Greece, so I'm going to pull for SUNY Buffalo.
Yeah, if my calculations are right, I believe Troy is somewhere in Texas, right? And
Alabama. I think it's Alabama, actually.
Is it Alabama? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, all the more reason why I think Troy has the advantage in this one.
Okay, and also in Greece, if I remember my classics correctly. The Sophie Hawaii Bowl is in Honolulu, Hawaii. Louisiana Tech versus Hawaii. When people travel as far as Hawaii to play a football game, I think they're going to be focused on other things than football. I'm pulling for the home team, University of Hawaii.
Yeah, I'm also pulling for Hawaii for all those same reasons.
The Serve Pro First Responder Bowl in Dallas is Boston College versus Boise State. And although I was almost pulling for BC, Boise State always has interesting teams. I love that aquamarine AstroTurf they play on. I'm pulling for Boise State.
Yeah, as much as I love Boston College, Mom having gone to law school there, I do have to think Boise State's going to pull this one out. BC's lost their last 3 in a row.
Okay, good point. The Quick Lane Bowl in Detroit, Michigan is Minnesota versus Georgia Tech, and I have to pull for the Big Ten team there, the Minnesota Gophers.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we have a Big Ten team in this one. Definitely got to pull for Minnesota here.
Great. The Cheez-It Bowl in Phoenix. I'm going to talk to you about Cheez-It. Cheez-It is not a food. Cheez-It is just styrofoam that's been spray painted orange. And I'm recommending that nobody eat Cheez-It, even if you go to the bowl. It's Cal versus TCU, University of California, Berkeley versus Texas Christian. Cal Berkeley being a public Ivy, I have to pull for Cal.
Yeah, I got to pull for Cal as well. Shout out to my roommate, Grace, Cal alum.
Good. Walk-On's Independence Bowl in Shreveport, Louisiana is Temple versus Duke. Mad shout out to Ray Matura, who's not here, but he's a Temple undergraduate alum. He's been in this area for over 40 years, but he still talks with a Philadelphia accent. He's right out of North Philly. So's Temple. I'm going for Temple.
I like Duke here. Shout out to homeboy Matt Cohen. I think they've had a really impressive season this year, and I think they're gonna pull it off against Temple.
Okay. The New Era Pinstripe Bowl is in the Bronx at Yankee Stadium. I've once seen a baseball game in Yankee Stadium. I've never seen a football game there. I think it would be fascinating to do that. University of Miami versus Wisconsin. I will make a sports comment now and say that both teams were expected to do much better. Wisconsin has really underperformed. I think they're only 7-5. I think they're going to step up and win this game.
Yeah, I think this is a rematch, if not from last year, a couple years ago. Got to pull for the Big Ten here in Wisconsin. I like them over the Hurricanes.
You're absolutely right. That's one of the few games I did research on, and I believe Wisconsin won 34-24 last year. So this is a rematch between those two games, between those two teams. So we're hoping for the Gophers. The Academy Sports Plus Outdoors Texas Bowl in Houston, Texas. That's Baylor versus Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt academically is better than Baylor. I don't know nothing about either team. I'm pulling for Vanderbilt.
I'm going to pull for Baylor here. Shout out to Uncle Steve.
That's his medical school, right? He did go to Baylor Med. If he watches this program, I might be in trouble. The Franklin American Mortgage Music City Bowl from Nashville is Purdue versus Auburn. Again, got to do the shout out for the Purdue Boilermakers. They beat a team 49-20 by 29 points. Oh, I think they beat Ohio State by that much. And Michigan lost to Ohio State by 23. So 29-23 is 52 points. So I think Purdue will win by 52 points.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I like the Boilermakers here as well. Shout out to homeboy Carlos. Purdue's got this one.
Okay. Camping World Bowl in Orlando. I guess there's a lot of bowls in Orlando. People can go to Disney World or whatever. That's West Virginia versus Syracuse. Have any of you heard Dana Holgerson, the coach of West Virginia? He is one of the best interviews ever. I love West Virginia. I love Dana Holgerson. He's a gambler, and I'm pulling for West Virginia, even though I know Syracuse has had a remarkably good year this year.
Syracuse has had an incredible year. They almost beat Clemson. They lost a very close game to Clemson. Shout out to Ravi, one of my closest friends and one of the best promoters in the Mid-Atlantic. Got to pull for the Orangemen here. Okay,
I think that's a game to watch. The Valero Alamo Bowl is in San Antonio, Texas. Iowa State versus Washington State. Mike, whatever his name is, that coach for Washington State, is a little bit crazy, but he's Washington State crazy, so I can't pick against him. I'm saying it's going to be Washington State.
I think it's Iowa State in this one. They hung really tough against Oklahoma. I think it's the Cyclones in this one.
Okay. The Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl in Atlanta on December 29th is your alma mater, your undergraduate alma mater, and my graduate alma mater, John. Florida versus Michigan, and I'm going to pull for the University of Michigan to beat Florida.
Yeah, I think Michigan wins big here. After that embarrassing loss against Ohio State and tough loss against Notre Dame at the start of the season, I think Harbaugh was on the hot seat this year. I think that he redeemed himself to a certain extent despite losing to Ohio State. I think we win big.
Absolutely. If you saw Michigan beat Wisconsin, beat Penn State, those are amazing victories. I hope the right Michigan team shows up. The Belk Bowl in Charlotte, North Carolina is South Carolina versus UVA. University of Virginia, the university started by Thomas Jefferson, our third president. How can I pull against them? I won't. I'm pulling for University of Virginia.
It's Will Muschamp's third season at South Carolina. I was very surprised when they beat us in the Outback Bowl last year. I think he's a great coach. I see South Carolina winning this one.
Okay. The Nova Home Loans Bowl from Nova Home Loans Arizona Bowl from Tucson, Arizona is Arkansas State versus Nevada. That's University of Nevada, Reno, where my younger brother Leonard was born, one of John's uncles. So I have to pull for University of Nevada.
Yeah, this is essentially a home game for Nevada. I like them as well.
Okay. And then we're to the college football playoff semifinal at Goodyear Cotton Bowl in Arlington, Texas. Clemson versus Notre Dame. I watched Notre Dame beat Michigan, but I think Notre Dame has some clear deficiencies. And whenever I pull against Clemson or Alabama, I'm wrong. So I'm going to pick Clemson in this one.
Yeah, I normally agree there, but Notre Dame being an independent in the Midwest, normally their strength of schedule is very strong. Even though they didn't have the toughest road to their flawless season so far this year, I do think they're going to win in a very close one.
Okay. And then the other college football playoff semifinal game at the Capital One Orange Bowl in Miami, Alabama versus Oklahoma. Watching Oklahoma a few times this year, they can score with anyone, and they can score all day. But I also don't think they can stop anyone. And even though Alabama's quarterback, Tua, you pronounce his last name, I can't. I have to pull for I have to think Alabama's going to win this game.
Yeah, despite both of these teams being on an elite level, Alabama's just in a league of their own.
Yeah. The Military Bowl, Northrop Grumman Bowl in Annapolis, Maryland, is Cincinnati versus Va-Tech versus Virginia Tech. Since my daughter and your sister, John, is a medical resident, OBGYN at the University of Cincinnati, I cannot pick against her until she finishes her residency. So I'm pulling for University of Cincinnati.
Well, having both a mom and sister in Cincinnati now, definitely got to pull for them. Even though I know how much Dad loves to say Va-Tech.
It's fun. It's fun. You should do it at home, but make sure your parents are around. It can get a little dangerous. The Hyundai Sun Bowl from El Paso, Stanford versus Pitt. Got to go with Stanford.
Shout out to my other roommate, Chris. I think it's Stanford in this one.
Okay. The Red Box Bowl from Santa Clara, California. That's Michigan State versus Oregon. I paid property taxes in Michigan for 20 years. There's no way I can pick against them, so I'm going for Michigan State.
Yeah, I am as well. They had a surprising loss against Arizona State, but they held tough against Michigan despite us beating them by 2 touchdowns. I think Michigan State's got this one.
Okay. AutoZone Liberty Bowl from Memphis, Missouri versus Oklahoma State. Missouri has been coming on strong recently. It's also my wife's Linda, undergraduate alma mater. So I have to pull for Missouri.
Yep. Shout out to Linda on this one. It's Missouri.
Okay. The San Diego County Credit Union Holiday Bowl, Northwestern versus Utah. Northwestern's a very good team. Not only making it to the Big Ten playoff game, but I forgot the name of the coach, the guy who was a linebacker at Northwestern. He's been there like 15 years. A really well-coached team, smart team. I think Northwestern's going to win this game.
Yeah, I do as well. Shout out to Dara in Houston. I hope you're watching. It's going to be the Wildcats.
And for those of you who don't know, John told me through his friend Dara that a Northwestern alumnus offered to buy tickets to the Big Ten title game for all Northwestern students. And apparently 3,400 of them took him up on it. I have no idea how much that cost, but clearly some of the Northwestern graduates have deep pockets and also a lot of generosity. What a nice thing to do. The Tax Slayer Gator Bowl from Jacksonville, Florida. NC State versus Texas A&M. And my response to that is, do you know any Aggie jokes? And I know a whole bunch of Aggie jokes. I've spent enough time in Texas to do that. And so I'm going to pull for Texas A&M.
NC State's on a 3-game win streak. I like the Wolfpack.
Well, that's a logical reason to pull for it, okay? You might beat me on that one. The Outback Bowl in Tampa is Mississippi State versus Iowa. Iowa City, a beautiful college town halfway across the country. Big Ten team. I'm pulling for University of Iowa. And is Kirk Ferentz still coaching there?
I'm not sure about that, but what I am sure of is that I'm glad we didn't play Iowa this year.
Okay.
You know, they look great. I'm also glad we didn't play Purdue. So, yeah, I think it's going to be the Hawkeyes.
Okay. The VRBO Citrus Bowl, that's got to be vacation rental by owner. Wow. So they're making enough money to sponsor a bowl. The VRBO Citrus Bowl from Orlando is Kentucky versus Penn State. First of all, I have great respect for Penn State, for their academics, for their football history. Kentucky is an incredible basketball legacy, basketball history. Are we sure they play football? I'm going to pull for Penn State. I think Penn State's going to win this.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, give credit to Kentucky, though, finishing the season 14th in the country. You know, they went 9-3. They finished second in the SEC East to Georgia.
Wow.
But, you know, at the same time, it's going to be Penn State here.
Wow, thank you for doing the research on that. And we're just like 50 miles away from Kentucky here, so I may have just talked myself into some trouble there. PlayStation Fiesta Bowl is in Glendale, Arizona. It's LSU versus UCF. University of Central Florida, like a lot of those directional schools in Florida, doesn't get appropriate respect. So I'm going to pull for UCF.
You know, I like that reasoning a lot, but I just think LSU's strength of schedule is so much more difficult. They made a lot of adjustments throughout the year. I think it's going to be Louisiana State.
Okay. The Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all, started in 1902 when Michigan went out and beat Stanford 49-0. One of the fascinating things about the Rose Bowl that I'm sure many of our listeners and watchers won't know is that Lowry's Steakhouse, that's LAWRY', and anywhere in the country you can buy Lowry's seasoned salt or Lowry's garlic salt. It comes from that restaurant. It's a really expensive high-end restaurant in Beverly Hills. And for decades now, at least back to the 60s, if not before, both the teams go to Lowry's to eat prime rib several days before the Rose Bowl. And then they publish how many pounds of roast beef that team ate as opposed to the other team. If you ever go to LA and you have deep pockets, you have to have roast beef at Lowry's. And there's one vegetable you are allowed to order. They have multiple kinds of potatoes. The only vegetable they have is spinach souffle. And they bring this huge roast beef to your table and they cut it. And it's a beautiful restaurant. So both those teams are going to overeat at Lowry's Steakhouse. And then Ohio State is going to beat University of Wisconsin, despite the fact that one of my best friends from Haverford College, David Jones, is deputy mayor in Seattle, and he is a big UW fan. But I have to go with Ohio State here. It's going to be Urban Meyer's last game. Those lads are going to play for him. And I think he's going to make us all Big Ten proud in that game. How about you, John?
I absolutely agree. Shout out to my brother-in-law, Paul, here. I really think Ohio State is going to light up the Cougars. Cougars just lost a bad one against the Washington Huskies in their season finale against their in-state rival. just to reiterate Dad's point about Urban Meyer's last game, I think they're going to have a lot to play for. You know, as sad as I am to not have Michigan in this game, I'm glad that we're represented well in Ohio State, and I think they're going to do work against Washington State here. So
great, great. I hope we're both right. And then the All-State Sugar Bowl in New Orleans with at least one team that thought it should be in the football playoffs. That's Texas versus Georgia. And again, Georgia easily could have been one of the top 4 teams. I think they ended up 5th or 6th. They were leading Alabama. They could have beaten Alabama in that game, in which case they would be in the college football playoffs. I can't pick against Georgia. University of Georgia in Athens.
I agree. At the same time, give Texas credit. You have to realize, I believe they opened the season losing to Maryland at home. At the same time, Texas, they made a lot of adjustments. They beat, I believe they handed Oklahoma their only loss of the season, and Oklahoma's in the playoffs. So Texas is definitely an elite team. At the same time, Georgia, you know, it's tough being in the same conference as Alabama, but absolutely. I think that they're going to win this one.
Okay, great. And those are the end of our picks, but then that means that I think it's going to be Alabama and Clemson in the January 7th college football playoff game. And I think that Alabama is going to win that game 30-17. Now, John agrees with me that Alabama will be there, but he thinks Notre Dame is going to beat Clemson. And so, John, can you explain your pick and also explain the basketball score that you're looking at in that game?
It's going to be an absolute shootout. Both teams have stellar offenses. Tua Tagovailoa is such an incredible treat to watch. I think it's going to be an amazing game. I think Notre Dame's gonna have an amazing finale to their season, but at the same time, nobody can touch Alabama this year.
Yeah. So, you know, once again, Nick Saban and his team, John and I are both saying that they're going to win the college football title. We'll see how that happens. So we're in our last 90 seconds or so of the show. Jonathan, it's so good that you zoomed in from San Francisco. Modern technology is wonderful. Mad shout out to Mike Thompson and to Patrick Dengel for making this thing happen. And it's already Wednesday. In about 48 hours, I'll see you at the Denver airport, and then we'll drive to Danny's house. Okay, is that a plan?
Absolutely, looking forward to it. Thank you guys so much for having me, everybody in Rio Grande. Really appreciate it. Hopefully I can be present next year as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Thanks to everybody for watching. We hope that everybody has had a happy Hanukkah, and we'll have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And please continue to watch Voice of Rio Grande, produced here in southeastern Michigan as a product of the University of Rio Grande. Southeastern Ohio. Okay, I'm sorry, I was looking at the Michigan thing, and I said southeastern Michigan. Okay, that's pretty funny. Okay, that was not an intended joke. That just came out, okay? Thanks, guys.